Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone. Where we're going to be picking up is on page 161. And we're at the very first paragraph on 161, Now This House. And what we're talking about is the growth of the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous. One alcoholic with another carrying this message to those who were struggling. And we were talking last week about what those early sort of meetings looked like, where they would go to T. Henry and Clarence Williams' house, 676 Palisades Drive in Akron, Ohio. And what some of those early meetings would look like when they're crashing the Oxford group. And they were actually known as the drunk squad of the Oxford group, which I will say, Drunk Squad, that's a fun little nickname. Drunk Squad. And we can imagine why the Oxford group was like, maybe they should go elsewhere. They didn't. They were perfectly fine having us. But we were talking about how in those early days, they were focusing on who they could help and carrying this message to. And so on 161, first full paragraph, it says, now this house, 676 Palisades Drive, T. Henry and Clarence Williams, that house will hardly accommodate its weekly visitors, for they number 60 or 80 as a rule. So people from all over Ohio would be driving to make this meeting where they could, meet together, and they'd be packing this house, 60 to 80 people, and it is a powerful thing. When we have something that works, that brings people in, that attracts people. Alcoholics are being attracted from far and near, from surrounding towns. Families drive long distances to be present. And that's the thing, man, if you're here today, I am grateful. Now in 2025, as long as we keep the camera up, we don't even have to wear pants if we show up to a meeting. Again, camera up if you're not wearing pants. But we get to show up from all over the world, hit a button, here we are. But in those early days, there's really two groups in the world, in New York City and in Akron, Ohio, and most of them are just hanging out in the Oxford group. And so the drive, they had to have that sense of connection, to meet with each other, to help each other. It goes on to say a community 30 miles away. Now, I do love my geography, but I won't make you Carmen Sandiego this thing. The community is Cleveland, Ohio. And the gentleman that started Alcoholics Anonymous in Cleveland, his name was Clarence Snyder. And he actually was like, hey, we've got the first AA in the world here in Cleveland, because it took a while for New York to break off from the Oxford group. And it took even longer for Akron to break off from the Oxford group. So Clarence was like, we got AA. And it was not always easy. Clarence Snyder was, I will say it as we often do, a difficult personality. Clarence was a tough cookie, that's for sure. He was difficult. He didn't like Bill, and I just point that out because God uses all of us, each and every one of us. And I know that you guys at your home group, you only have lovely people all the time, and nobody pushes anyone's buttons ever. But it's just a reminder that God often uses difficult people, and God can use us too. So it says, a community 30 miles away in Cleveland, by the way. When I was out physically in Cleveland in person, I spoke at a meeting out there, and I kicked off my talk by saying, Paige Alcoholic, obviously, but I was like, Cleveland, I have it on good authority that Cleveland rocks. And nobody got that, and nobody found that funny. Also, I had two friends that I was traveling with, and both of them, I was traveling with a bunch of friends, but two out of my friends had narcolepsy, separately, independently of each other. So two of my friends are sleeping through the talk. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Cleveland, is all I'm genuine, I'm not even kidding. So a community 30 miles away has 15 fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Being a large place, we think that someday its fellowship will number many hundreds, and that is true. And it's a reminder that wherever we live in the world, wherever we live in the world, that group, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, was started typically by one alcoholic who got a copy of this book. You know, one person who is willing to help somebody else, one person who is willing to follow these directions and try to carry this message. And yeah, in 2026, all I got to do is I got to show up on Zoom, and it's so easy, but it tells me about the posture of the heart that I get to have, that spirit of giving, that spirit of helping, that spirit of reaching out and inviting in. And it says, but life among Alcoholics Anonymous is more than. So I want to point something out. Life in Alcoholics Anonymous, this is what those early days were like. It is this. Now it's going to say it's more than this, but I want to have a look at some of what it was. And it will illuminate what I say all the time, which is it is meant to be inconvenient. If I am not a little bit inconvenienced, I got to get more sponsees, or we got to be working more intensively. I got to get it inconvenient, just a little. You can have hobbies. And it says, so is more than attending gatherings and visiting hospitals. So those gatherings would be the meetings. And again, in 2026, we have, shout out to Ladybug Roundup. We have gatherings like the roundups. We have gatherings like, see what I did? I'm on it. I am not on it today. The joke was that I'm on it, and I'm like, I am not. But gatherings like roundups, conventions, barbecues, like some of those things that we do where we get together. But also the gatherings that is our meetings. And it says, in visiting hospitals. Now in 2026, that often looks like hospitals and institutions work. Going and speaking at treatment centers, going and speaking at psych wards, and those places where we get invited into to speak, to carry the message. And it says, cleaning up old scrapes, which is a lot of helping people with their amends in a very direct way. That's what that looks like. I know. And then it says helping to settle family differences. You know what that also looks like? Helping with the 9th step amends. It's not getting in the middle of it and be like, hey, here's what you need to do. I point that out because it talks about in the chapter Working with Others, where it's like, don't get in the middle of their family disagreements. That's not a good idea. But we're talking about helping hands-on in the 9th step amends. Explaining the disinherited son to his irate parents. So that kid that got kicked out of the house because he can't stay sober. Explaining the nature of alcoholism to the parents who are just frustrated with that behavior. And welcome those that just joined us. We're on page 161, and we are at the second full paragraph, bottom half of the page. And it goes on to say, it says lending money and securing jobs for each other. And then it says when justified. I will just let you know that in 1939, there were not, when this book was published, 35 to 39, when they're reflecting on the work that they had done during this time, there were not a lot of social safety nets. There were not things in place. And the United States was in the midst of the Great Depression. And so they were helping each other just to survive, just to keep their heads above water as it is. But I will throw out, it's not a good idea to lend people money in Alcoholics Anonymous. One, because you're not likely to get it back. You know what I mean? I'm just going to let you know that. And actually, there's a lot of times when people reach out and they want money, it's like, oh no, I know what that means. That means they're off. They're on a spree. That's not good. But also, it's not good for them. And it talks about this in the 12 traditions, where if I am to lend people money, it creates an unfair situation for them. And we also talk about this a whole bunch in the chapter Working with Others, where it's like, hey, it's not about giving, but when and how to give. If I lend somebody money, and I know you guys have always, your entire life, especially in your alcoholism and early sobriety, been really fiscally responsible. I know you guys have, yikes. But I know nobody here has ever borrowed money and then, I don't see the debt. I don't see it, right? Now, if I lend money to somebody in AA and they don't pay me back, is it possible that they're going to avoid going to meetings to see me? To avoid, you know what I mean? Could I make it harder for them to come to AA, make it harder for them to reach out to help, to get help? I'm just throwing that out there. So, but in those early days, there weren't those social safety nets, and they were holding on to each other, to help each other. And when and how to give, that's described in great detail in the chapter Working with Others. And it says, these are everyday occurrences. Oh man, every day? I gotta be helping somebody every day? But I thought I could act the Good Samaritan once in a while. I'm referencing earlier parts of the book. But truly, it's like, but it's meant to be just a little bit inconvenience. And when we talk about one day at a time, what we don't mean is just don't drink one day at a time. Just don't do it. Don't drink. Just today, don't do it. Why? Because we can't do it. That sucks. It's so painful. But when we talk about one day at a time, we're talking about living these 12 steps as a way of life one day at a time, practicing the tangible actions of the 12 steps one day at a time, helping others one day at a time. That is what allows us to live this way of life, and that's what it means. Oh man, every day. But when we're doing it every day, I promise, it is not as much work as it sounds like. In fact, I wouldn't give it up for anything. It goes on to say, no one is too discredited. No one is too discredited or has sunk too low to be welcomed cordially. And then we got an M dash, if he means business. And to be fair, if you don't mean business, still welcome. We're glad you're here. Come hang out. But what it's saying is, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter the darkness of your past or what feels like that black sludge on your soul. It doesn't matter that you don't think you might be worthy of this thing. If you're here and you're willing to let us help you, man, we will bust our butts to make it happen for you. And if that feels uncomfortable, it's like, oh, please don't be nice to me, because that's how I felt when I got here. Don't you worry. Our very life depends on helping you. We're doing it so we get to be alive and free. And if you get to be alive and free too, man, that is just the cherry on top. And it talks about social distinctions, petty rivalries, jealousies. These are laughed out of countenance. Like what it's saying is, we don't show up here with these social distinctions, which is good because I don't have many social distinctions, I have to speak at a foundation meeting this weekend, and we were joking about, I was like, oh, you and your hoity-toity friends, and my friend that asked me to speak, he's like, yeah, Paige, you gotta wear one of your fancier hoodies because it's a real posh place, just joking about that, right? That we're all welcome exactly as we are, thank goodness, because I'm not going to change this hoodie until it gets dirty. Then I get a whole other hoodie for the next week, So it goes on to say, being wrecked in the same vessel, being restored and united under one God, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others. The things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them. How could they? Now, if you're writing in your book, you can make a little note that what we are referencing there is on page 17. And on page 17, what we're referencing is the Titanic disaster. And the Titanic sunk in the year of 1912. So it was a tragedy that was well known about, but not so close in history that it was a touchy subject for a lot of people. And on page 17, there is a solution. It talks about how we are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. And it's that idea of like Jack is at steerage and Rose is captain's table. I'm making a James Cameron movie reference. And some of y'all know, man, that was a two VHS sort of deal back in the day. I have a sponsee, and he watched that movie when he was young, and he was like, Paige, that is not a healthy sex ideal. And I'll point it out. She was in a very unhappy situation and engaged to somebody else. She was also just about to throw herself off the front of the boat. So she's not physically available to be in a relationship. She's clearly not emotionally and spiritually available to be in a relationship. She really needed to get connected with a bunch of God-centered women that could help her take a course of action that could lead her to freedom. But, and they have a torrid love affair that lasts a couple days, and then he drowns in the ocean. And I'm just saying we can aim for a healthier ideal. You know what I'm saying? But when we talk about this idea that we are wrecked in the same vessel, what we're talking about is that common problem that we see on page 17. We come to Alcoholics Anonymous with our common problem. Our common problem is alcoholism. I've got the allergy of the body. I've got the obsession of the mind. That's what we're all bringing to the table. And underneath that, we have a spiritual malady. Spiritual malady doesn't define alcoholism, but man, it is a painful thing to live with. And we are drowning in the icy North Atlantic of my own life, where I'm treading water and I know I can't make it there. And we're all treading water in that icy North Atlantic Sea, knowing that there is no way out. And that is important to understand, that we suffer from the same peril, but man, that can't keep me sober. I can't stay sober on I'm drowning. And we can't stay connected on we're drowning. It helps to know that we were all drowning together. But here's what allows us to stay sober. Bottom of page 17. The tremendous fact. And it is tremendous because, again, we are doomed to die out at sea, the sea of alcoholism. It says the tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. Now, the common solution that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous, that is the spiritual awakening. That is our common solution. And when it says we have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and in which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action, that is the 12 steps. That's what we have to get us out of the ocean, to be restored, to be united, and to be brought to that place of spiritual awakening. So on page 161, when it says being wrecked in the same vessel, that was our common peril. That was the common illness that we have of alcoholism. And to be restored and united under one God. And no, hey, if you're not listen, I'm not monotheistic, and you're like, one God? Oh no. It's just, hey, we have the common experience of the spiritual awakening. Don't stress out about that. I actually did have a sponsee. Oh, I love her. And we were like, clearly, we're at the end, and I read this, and she's like, Paige, you've bamboozled me. One God. And she was joking. She was joking about it. But with being restored and united under one God. How do I get to be restored? And how do I get to that place of becoming whole? That is the purpose of the 12 steps. The purpose of the 12 steps is that it takes me to a place where that transformation happens, where I get changed from the inside out. And this is how we know we've had a spiritual awakening, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others. I oftentimes talk about the posture of my heart, which, man, when I got here, I thought I was too cool for school. I'm not a cool person. I have never been a cool person. And I'm not today. I don't claim that, but I'm like, no. But today, I am somebody that regularly, I talk about the posture of my heart. Because I can feel that. I can tangibly feel when I am closed. I can feel when I show up and I am walled off. And I can feel that experience of where my heart is open and I want to help and I want to give and I'm here for you with that open heart. And I talk about that quite a bit because I can tap into it. That posture of my heart. And one of the most surefire signs of a spiritual awakening is the desire to go help somebody else. Which doesn't mean if you don't want to that you don't. Oh, thank you. You're lying about me being cool, but thank you. I'll take it. I won't fight you on it. Yeah, I know. Otherwise, that's all the chat will be. Accept the compliment, Paige. I will. But one of the most surefire signs of a spiritual awakening is the desire to go help somebody else. Which is not to say, if you don't feel like doing it, don't do it. Go do it anyways. And what we will find is we will come to want to do it. And when we show up to anything in our life, we show up to meetings, when we show up to work, when we show up to family, it takes very little to change the posture of our heart. To show up to life where I'm constricted and I'm walled off and I'm not open, to where that heart is open and I'm focusing on what I can give. It doesn't take much. Unfortunately, in my case, it takes the 12 steps and applying that on a daily basis and applying that to the situation. But man, it is powerful that it works. And when it talks about the things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them, how could I? Actually, man, I'm going to bounce this around. I don't mean to be doing this, but sometimes my brain just goes. So let's pop over to We Agnostics. Let me get the page for us. So the chapter is We Agnostics, and the page is page 54. And what we're going to talk about, page 54 and page 55, more so page 54, first full paragraph, where it talks about we found too that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? What am I worshiping? I'm worshiping at the second step. It's like I have no capacity for worship, but man, we have faith and we have had worship all over the place. The worship of people is codependency. That I need this person to like me for me to be okay. If that person gives me approval, I'll be okay. I know I'm the only person here that has daddy issues. Older male attention, that'll fix me, Again, I know I'm the only one. No one else can relate. But that's or that if I can get in a relationship, if I can get married, if I can look like somebody wants me, then I'll be okay. And what it's saying on 161 is that no longer matters to us. And on page 54, when it talks about worshiping sentiment, those old ideas, those ideals, those prestige, that ego and image, that. And on page 161, that doesn't matter to me anymore. I often talk about the freedom that I've had, especially in the past where it's like, people are like, I don't like you. And I'm like, that is a fair assessment, and I am ridiculously unbothered. Not today, a little sensitive today. I'm just kidding. But like that freedom. And when it talks about worshiping things, that's that property. That's the things that I can buy. I got the fancy car, brand new car. I live in the nice neighborhood. I've got all the brand new phone. I don't have any of those. But if I have this, if I keep up with the Joneses, and those Joneses keep moving the goalposts, it's rude. But if I keep up with them, I'll be okay. If people can just see that I look like I'm doing well, everything's okay. And then when it talks about money, if I make this much, if I climb the corporate ladder this much, if I get all of this, money, power, property, prestige. And so on page 54, man, we had those. Those were our gods. I can't believe in God. Man, I got gods all over the place. And they aren't enough to keep me sober, let alone happy, let alone free, let alone transformed. The number in my bank account could not save me from me. The validation that I could get from an employer couldn't fix the depth of pain that I felt on the inside. But here on page 161, those things don't matter to us. How could they? Because we have begun to taste the capital R, the real. What really matters. That awakening, that spiritual awakening. And I quote the capital R real because one of the contemporaries of William James, who wrote the book Varieties of Religious Experience, was a homie of mine named Evelyn Underhill, and she studied spiritual awakening. She had a number of books on spiritual awakenings under the title of mysticism. And she spoke about what is it to be a mystic? It is to begin to have a relationship with the capital R real. that strange world of alcoholism where everything is exaggerated and distorted, and I cannot see what is real. And I can't see what is real, drunk or sober, because I am so wrapped up in the bondage of self, and I can't see through the fog of me. It is me on me like bone on bone. And what happens is I take this course of action that I don't like and I don't believe in and I do not think will help, and I go after it. I go after it like my life depends on it. Spoilers, because it does. And I get transformed. Almost against my will, I get transformed and I change. And the things that matter don't matter to me. And I don't want to get too personal, but I had somebody in my life who was incredibly abusive, and he would scream at me, and I'm not exaggerating. He would scream at me because I did not have money, property, prestige, power. Because I'm disabled, so I live at home, and I don't work. Again, disabled, and he would scream at me and belittle me and berate me because of those things, and that didn't feel good. But I remember, and I have family, and I've had people that aren't the biggest Paige fans. Fair enough, because I don't have a lot of that social, the social stuff that other people do. But I'll tell you, I remember this moment where I really was like, I was in the backyard, the sun was shining. It was just one of those days where I was tapped in, I was connected, and I had this experience of like, if my life did not depend on their approval, would I be happy with how I lived my life? And the answer was yes. The answer was yes, because I'm this silly little alcoholic, this fall down failure of a drunk, and I get to be of help to other people, and I get to be of use to other people. And the things that I really want to do in life, I get to do through this lens. Man, this is what I want to do, and I'm doing it. You know what I mean? And like that is like freedom from that. The things that matter so much to other people don't matter anymore. And it's been a real journey to move through some of that stuff. And I'm still moving through some of that stuff. But what we get to be, man, I'm on so many tangents, and I know we're almost at the 164, and it's like, we're not finished. We'll probably finish next week, but not this week, that's for sure. But that idea that like, the description of what is sainthood, and it is a gentleman, Father Thomas Merton, who was, I believe he was a Benedictine, but he was a real interfaith guy. And on one of the apps, they have a he's not a saint, but he's a pretty cool guy. Anywho, he talked about what does it mean to be a saint, and his description was to become the truest version of ourselves, to become who God truly wanted us to be, which is to say who I always wanted to be all along. It's like, yeah, we get to be that person, a bright light wherever we are in the world for those that are in the darkness. And that is powerful. Even if I don't have a new car or any car, and even if I don't, what I mean? Even if I don't have the fancy stuff. And yeah, this was a secondhand hoodie. It was a gift. All right. So it says, under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in many eastern cities. Now, for those of you who are not in the United States, the West is Ohio, and if you look at a map, it's like, that's pretty east. And then the eastern cities that they're referencing, yes, the Thomas Merton Prayer. And that is, oh man, sorry, off on a tangent. I was explaining east is New York and New York and New Jersey, that area. But what I love about the Thomas Merton Prayer is it talks about that, like, all I need to do is my best to do what God's will is. I don't have to know what it is. I don't need to know the full journey. I just got to do that. And it's beautiful. It's powerful. And I do, that's one of the prayers that I say every day. So under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in many eastern cities. So those cities around New York City, as they call it, the Big Apple. And I learned that if you're from New York, you don't like being called an appletini. That hasn't stopped me, though. I just think that's funny. Alrighty. In one of these, there's a well-known hospital for the treatment of alcoholic and drug addiction. Now, if we're wondering, it is the Towns Hospital in New York City. That's what we're talking about. And I always forget to do this. If you're interested in the Towns Hospital, a friend of this study, Gary, and he wrote a book all about the history of Charles Towns and the Towns Hospital. And it's literally on a table over there, and I don't have it at arm's reach. So if you're interested, it genuinely is quite interesting. And it says 6 years ago, one of our number was a patient there. So it's the Towns Hospital in New York City, and the patient is Bill Wilson. That's who was a patient there. Many of us have felt for the first time the capital P, and capital G, the presence and power of God within its walls. And when we talk about that, the presence and power of God, we're pointing to that power which is beyond the title, which is God, but we're also talking about the spiritual awakening. These people who are at the Towns Hospital, and Bill Wilson and Fitzmayo and some of the other guys, Hank Parkhurst would go and try to carry this message, some of the New Yorkers, to these people in the hospital. And they would take the course of action that later became the 12 steps, and they would begin to awaken spiritually. They would begin to feel what is available, presence and power of God within the walls, because they were willing to take action. And I love the idea that it is presence and power of God. Presence is a here and now, and power. Like, that's what I need. If I'm powerless, I need power. A relationship with power. And that tells me that this power is far more than an over there idea of God, but one that is here and now and moving. And it says we are greatly indebted to the doctor in attendance there. Now that doctor is Dr. Silkworth. And he had the two statements that are in the doctor's opinion. So that's who that guy is, Dr. Silkworth. Or as I like to call him, Silky, because I think I'm best friends with all these history people. My homie, Silky, he's just the best. He's a little doctor, great guy. We go way back. I've obviously never met him. He died before the second edition came out. So. But that's Dr. Silkworth, and he gave us knowledge of what it means to be an alcoholic, what it means to have alcoholism. So it says we're greatly indebted to the doctor there, for he, although it may prejudice his own work, has told us of his belief in ours. He was going out on a limb, saying that alcoholism is an illness. That wasn't a widely accepted belief. There was an article in the medical journal Lancet, and there was a couple people thinking that, but that was not a widely held belief. But then to go out on another limb and say that the solution for this illness that is alcoholism, you're expecting me to suspend disbelief that this thing is an illness and not just a bunch of moral degenerates? I mean, the shoe does fit over here, but for you guys, you lovely folks, absolutely not. But that the solution to that is spiritual, is a spiritual awakening. Like, he's really exposing himself in that way. And the reason he did is that it worked. It worked. Listen, Bill was a guy. I think he was probably pretty charismatic, but I don't think he was that charismatic that Dr. Silkworth, would like hang himself out to dry just because Bill was charismatic. No, it was because for these real alcoholics, these patients that nobody else could help, here was something that was actively working. People were getting sober and staying sober. That's why he was able to suggest it. And it says every few days, this doctor suggests our approach to one of his patients. Understanding our work, he can do this with an eye to selecting those who are willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. And if you're here today, I want you to know you're willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. Yes, you can. That's one of my hills that I die on. You can recover. I believe that. I mean that. I know that. You can recover and get well. But what would he likely be looking for? Because maybe he's looking for people who are open to spirituality already, maybe people that are religious, but I don't think that's quite what he would be looking for. I think he'd be looking for the guy that was in and out of the hospital and probably didn't pay his last hospital bill. That guy. I think that's who he was looking for the person that was beaten and broken. and could see that there was no way out. For the person like Bill, who was, Dr. Silkworth was telling Lois, his wife, like, listen, Lois, you've got to get Bill's affairs in order. He's not going to survive. If you have some money left over, you can lock him away in an institution, but he's not going to live long. That, guys like that. Because it is when I come to that place of hopelessness, when I come to the end of myself, that's when I'm willing to accept this thing. Because this thing is like, it's a lot of work. You're going to tell me about God? I don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? It's when I come to the end of myself. So I think that's who he was looking for. And it goes on to say, many of us former patients go there to help. Why? Because just as we saw in Akron, Ohio, they knew that if they were to stay sober, they had to try to help others. They had to try to carry this message to others, to work with others. That was what they were doing because it helped them. If I want to stay sober and I want to be happy, unfortunately, I got to sponsor others. And it's fortunately on the other side of it. It's the best thing ever. But if I want, that's been my experience. It goes on to say, then in this eastern city, there are informal meetings, such as we have described to you. So the AA meetings. Now, originally they were hanging out at, Oxford group meetings, and they would meet there, which I will say I sort of love, because a lot of the Oxford group people were kind of like upper class fancy pants people, and hoity-toity is the clinical term. These fancy people, and then you would have like Bill and like bringing in this like puking street drug that's just like, and it like hasn't showered, and all of that, and it's like, here it is, like, here we are, and it's like, oh, that's the drunk squad. Sit them over there. but to be fair, I really do think the Oxford group was probably quite accommodating. I know that because if you're ever interested in the history of the Oxford group, there's a number of books that you can read. I listened to one of my favorites is The 8 Points of the Oxford Group. It's actually an Australian book. Shout out Michelle. Aussie. And then there's For Sinners Only, which is by A.J. Russell, and it tells the story of the first person who got sober in the Oxford group, and his name was Bill Pickle, and he was married to Mrs. Pickle, and they had like 13 kids who were called the Pickles, and he was a bootlegger at Penn State, and I have a little design. He had a big comedic mustache, and he got sober in the Oxford group, and to be fair, it was Frank Buchman had this like fancy beaver hat, and the guy was like, I want your hat, and he's like, okay, take the hat, and then that was enough to sort of bribe him to come on a trip to Toronto, and he ended up getting sober in the Oxford group, and they were helping alcoholics. So I don't think they were super like, ew, gross, the drunks. I don't think they were like that. But I just think it's funny, the juxtaposition that happens in my mind, like, oh, why, yes, let us talk about our eloquent spirituality. And then Jerry's over there having shakes in the corner, I just love it. Alrighty. So many of us former patients go there to help. Then in this eastern city, there are informal meetings such as we have described to you, where you may now see scores of members. There are the same fast friendships. There is the same helpfulness to one another as you find among our Western friends. Now that fast friendship, that's that thing where it's like, man, most of us have never met in person. Most of us, you know that thing where you go to a meeting when you're out of town? I think I spoke about this last week, but it's my most ignored suggestion for sponsees, where it's like, if you're out of town, go to a meeting out of town. And you go there. And even though you don't know a single other soul, there's that like instant connection. Oh man, they do it just like at home, and then maybe they do something a little different. Like in Prince Edward Island, they have a chip board where if you get like a 30 days, instead of getting your own chip, there's a board, and you got to move a chip on a board. It's a whole different thing, and the people there that are local, they're excited to have you and connect, and you might get roped into service. But I feel like I shouldn't tell you that because I want you to go. But there's that quick connection. Man, we were drowning in the North Atlantic of our alcoholism together, and we have this common journey that we walk shoulder to shoulder, and we're able to be and to stay connected. And that same helpfulness to one another. And for me, that's that reminder. I always want to make sure I'm showing up in that spirit of helpfulness. Am I perfect? No. Is the posture of my heart always perfect? No. But can I do my utmost that I'm showing up wherever I go with that open heart, that posture, that spirit of helpfulness? And when it says our Western friends, again, for people who don't live in the United States, Western means Ohio. And again, if you look at the map, it's like, it's not even halfway. It's still on the east side, but just throwing that out there for those that, because if you know a little bit about geography, Western friends, you'd expect it to be like California, Oregon, or something like that, you know? And it says there is a good bit of travel between east and west, and we foresee a great increase in this helpful interchange. And that's what's happened. You know, things in New York, things in Akron, things in Cleveland. There are little differences in the meetings, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And yet we are all connected throughout the world by our commonalities of our common problem, our common solution, and our common program of action. And how beautiful that is. How beautiful that we are a link in an unbroken chain that happened, you know, that started Mother's Day in 1935 when Bill Wilson began to connect with Dr. Bob. You know, that first successful 12-step call. We are all here because of that. How incredible. And it says someday we hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination. To some extent, this is already true. Some of us are salesmen and go about. Little clusters, 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities through contact with our two larger centers. Now nobody's going to remember this reference, but you can make a little note to see page XV. So way back when we first kicked off this study, in the forward to the second, XV, hold on. In the forward to the second edition, it talks about, forward to the second edition, first page of that, first paragraph of that. It says, since the original foreword to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle has taken place. Didn't know you could get miracles at Costco? You know, wholesale. That's my joke, but I want to point out, what is a miracle? A miracle is something that goes against the natural course of life, of reality. An alcoholic getting sober, staying sober, being happy, joyous, and free, that is nothing less than a miracle. It's important that I remember that, and it happens at a wholesale scale. The only thing that is asked of me is that I work these 12 steps as a way of life like my life depends on it, because it does. That's all that's asked of me, and the miracle happens. And we do have free samples, just like at Costco. Anywho, it says, our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship. Now, it's interesting. It said a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it was little clusters in those early days, and people were writing letters back and forth. And it says already, continues the early text, 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities. So that's what it's referencing here at the very bottom of page 162. And so those early days, imagine, you know, we're privileged to live in a time and a place that we do where, yeah, we get to Zoom, and most places in the world have AA meetings and many to choose from. So we got to be like, ooh, I don't like that one. And to be fair, that's how most meeting gets started. You know, a resentment in a coffee pot. I don't like how you're doing it. I'm doing it my way at a different meeting. Great. That's how the fellowship grows. I mean, yeah. And so back on page 162, where it talks about, you know, so some of us are salesmen and go about. Little clusters of 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities through contact with our two larger centers. So Akron, Ohio, and New York City. Those are the two larger centers because that's where these groups were, started. So they had a head start on this thing. And it says, those of us who travel drop in as often as we can. And it was a responsibility and a privilege. It says this practice enables us to lend a hand and at the same time avoiding certain alluring distractions of the road about which any traveling man can inform you. And so when they were traveling, they would go to local meetings where they were at. But what was the posture of their heart? How they could help. And yes, the byproduct is like, hey, it's helpful when you're traveling away from home and there are alluring distractions of the road. But that ability to go and to show up with the posture of how can I help? That is powerful. And it's, hey, listen, I know I'm not going to sell you on going to a meeting if you're out of town, but what I will say is it is great for you. And by the way, if you do it, especially if it's not a tourist attraction, like a tourist place, a lot of times they want to show you around and you get to see all the things. You know what I mean? They're like, oh yeah, come, let us show you all the spots and come out for dinner. There's like often a lot of hospitality. But if I show up with what can I bring? You know what I mean? Especially if it's a small town. If it's a small town with one meeting, it's, and I shouldn't stereotype, but we know it's like the same four old guys who've heard each other's story a million times. So you get to be a bright spot in their day too. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, focus on what I can give. It goes on to say, thus we grow and so can you. See this chapter, a vision for you. This matches and mirrors Bill Wilson's vision on page 14. Bill Wilson, he had a powerful spiritual awakening. And then he was laying in his hospital bed and he thought, man, if I could help people who are hurting and who are dying the way that I have been helped, maybe they could help others. And a vision for you is giving that vision that Bill Wilson had and giving it to us. The thrust of this chapter is about me going out into the world and helping others, and from there a fellowship growing up about me. So it says, thus we grow and so can you. That was the whole point of the history tangent, where it's like, this is how we did it and you can do it too, which also is the whole point of the whole book. This is how we recovered and you can do it too, because we did it. And so it goes on to say, though you be but one man with this book in your hand, we believe and hope it contains all you will need to begin. Now keep in mind, we're alone in 1940, 1941. I don't know a single other sober soul. That's how almost every meeting in the world got started. There was one alcoholic who got a copy of this book and followed its directions to get well. And when it says, we believe and hope it contains all you will need to begin. That's why we've been studying this book, because this book gives me all that I need to have a spiritual awakening. It gives me what I need to diagnose myself as an alcoholic. It gives me the directions on how to take the course of action that is the 12 steps. It gives me the directions on how to continue that process in 10, 11, and 12. It gives me the directions on how to work with others. It then gives me the directions on hey, after you've recovered and you've awakened, there's going to be some troubles in your family. There's going to be some difficulties navigating this new way of life, and here are the directions. And what we're reading is the directions on how to build that fellowship around us. And so it says that it has what we hope is that all you will need to begin. And I want to take a lens into that word, begin. Begin. These 12 steps are the beginning. They are a way of life. We often hear it said that AA is spiritual kindergarten, and it is. And I feel like I'm also called to at least make it to the 3rd grade. You know what I'm saying? At least, right? That we get to grow. and we get to experience, and we get to deepen. And what's the most incredible thing that I have found is that there is no glass ceiling here. There is no end. And to be fair, you're like, there's no end. If we haven't started, that's not a message, I hope. But when we're living this way of life, we get to seek deeper. We get to experience more. There is so much, and we get to scrape the surface by going through that first set of steps and beginning to awaken, and then is a lifetime of growth that lies before us. We get to begin this wonderful, incredible way of life. And this I love, because how often do I say, this book meets me where I'm at and then takes me where I need to go? And I say it again and again and again, that if this book can meet me where I'm at and take me where I need to go, is it not possible that that is what God does too? That God will meet me where I am at in the here and now and take me to where I need to go. And this is a beautiful example of it. We know what you are thinking. You are saying to yourself, I'm jittery and alone. I couldn't do that. And man, I can't tell you how true that is. Now, I sponsor alcoholics. And so I sponsor men, I sponsor women, I sponsor drunks, you know what I'm saying? So I am going to speak in broad stroke stereotypes, very, very broad strokes. So if what I'm saying doesn't apply to you, don't worry about it. But when I work with men, the stereotype is like, we haven't even gone through the doctor's opinion, and it's like, can I sponsor everybody? That's my stereotype. Of not all the guys I work with are like that. But that's kind of what it's like. I can do it. Let me sponsor. Now here's my experience. Typically working with women is it's a little bit more like gone through the book line by line, amends are made, they're doing the thing, and they're like, I don't know if I can. I think I'm gonna make it worse. I don't know, right? And that, again, broad strokes, stereotypes, but that's typically it. And so we're meeting us in that place of, man, this is a lot. This is a big responsibility. And this is the book taking us where we need to go. It says, but you can do this. You can help others. You can carry this message. And I'll say what I say to the people that I work with that are scared. First and foremost, alcoholism is a progressive, incurable illness. It is fatal. You can't make it worse. It's already as bad as it's going to get. And if you show up with your experience and this book, you might even help. You know what I mean? You do not have the power. This is another way that I do it. You are not alcoholism. Therefore, you do not have the power to make them drink. And I've got some news. Hopefully this is not brand new news. You're also not God. I know. And as a result, you don't have the power to keep them sober. All we're going to do is share our experience with this work and take their hand through the process and put it in the hand of God. That's all we're going to do. And it goes on to say, you forget. But you can. You forget that you have just now tapped a source of power much greater than yourself. See, this isn't a puddle of power. This is a raging torrent of spiritual power, unlimited power that we have begun to just tap, begun to gain access to, begun to build a relationship with power. I don't have to keep them sober. In fact, I couldn't. I have tried. I'm codependent as heck. I've given it my best go. It is God that is going to keep them sober, and the 12 steps are going to get them to God. When I say God, I mean the idea of a conception of a power greater than yourself that you are the most open to. When I say God, I mean God, creator, spirit of the universe, whatever you are most open to. That. We build that experience with that relationship with that. And it says to duplicate with such backing. We got some backing. You know what I mean? We got the spirit of the universe that's backing us. We got some backing. You ain't on the fired lines of life alone. We got some backing. That is some heavy duty backing. With such backing, so not on my own, with this power, what we have accomplished is only a matter of willingness, patience, and labor. Willingness, patience, and labor. We often talk about happy, joyous, and free. To get to happy, joyous, and free, I need that willingness, I need that patience, and I need that labor. Willingness to do what? Willingness to work with others, especially when it's inconvenience. patience to sit down with them, to help them through this process, to help them take this course of action and labor, because it's going to be work. But I promise it is the most rewarding work that I have ever done in my life, and it is powerful work. And the only thing that I need to do is to continue to do the work that I need to do, to clear away the stuff between me and this power, 4 through 9, and I do that in 10, I do that 11. Grow that relationship with that power with prayer and meditation, and be willing to go help others. That's all that's needed. And man, if I'm struggling, by the way, if it's like, man, nobody's staying sober, guess what? I'm well ahead of those that aren't doing it. And I'm gaining more experience that I can use to then help the next person. None of this gets wasted. And that's a minute over. So I'll stop it there and I'll toss it over to Vivian.